U.S. Department of Government Efficiency Chief Elon Musk has announced a freezing of $21 million in financial assistance to India. This money was used to increase voter turnout in elections. Thus, the move has raised eyebrows. It has ignited also a war of words between the BJP and the Congress. While leaders are sparring, none other than U.S. President Donald Trump has also waded in. Trump has defended Musk's decision and asked why Washington should give aid to India, which has enough money as it is. Stating that he has a lot of respect for India and Prime Minister Modi, Trump questioned the grant.
Well, why are we giving $21 million to India? They got a lot of money. They're one of the highest taxing countries in the world in terms of us. We can hardly get in there because their tariffs are so high. I have a lot of respect for India. I have a lot of respect for the Prime Minister. He just left, as you know, 2 days ago. But we're giving $21 million for voter turnout. It's voter turnout in India. What about, like, voter turnout here? Oh, we've done that, I guess. We did 500 million, didn't we? It's called the lockboxes.
Trump's crackdown on USAID is garnering praise not just from within India but also from other world leaders. One such leader is the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Orban has alleged that NGO networks led by Hungarian-American billionaire George Soros are fleeing to Belgium following Trump's move. Meanwhile, back at home, the BJP and the Congress are fighting over election interference concerns. What's interesting is that the $21 million grant by USAID was linked to a coalition of NGOs, the CEPPS, which in turn is linked to the International Foundation for Electoral Systems. Joining us live, Adit Kothari, founding member, Indic Society. Professor Madhav Nalapat, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, is joining us live. Gautam Mukherjee, senior journalist, is also with us on the broadcast. Adit Kothari, let me bring you in here. Well, how do you react to the politics that has erupted back home after this decision was taken to scrap this money by the United States of America? Money which was reportedly meant for increasing voter turnout in India?
Absolutely. I mean, you think about it in retrospect, if India was to spend 21 million to encourage voters to come out and vote in US elections, what would the reaction in the United States be? It would be of foreign interference. It would be, damnable to the extent. Similarly, if 21 million is being spent in the gimmick or the garb of political astuteness or political engagement, it is ultimately foreign interference, and it needs to be investigated thoroughly. Obviously, Veena Reddy, who was the then chair of USAID India between 2021 and 2024, has now gone back. So there is no questioning her or her boss Eric Garcetti of the time. They will obviously not give us the right answers that we seek. So deeper investigations need to be conducted by Indian investigative agencies, and we need to get down to the absolute bottom of it as to where those funds, were dispersed to, who are the beneficiaries, and how did the beneficiaries essentially use those funds in the broad landscape of Indian politics. Did they actually engineer, truly voter turnout? Do they encourage the voters to come out and to vote in the Indian elections, or was it used in some sort of other vicious narrative building exercise? So I think those are some of the pertinent questions that are there in everybody's mind now, whether you are from the BJP camp of side or the Congress side of the camp. Those questions need to be investigated and answers need to be sort of given to the various stakeholders of the Indian electorate. So there.
A political war of words has erupted here over who this money was helping, over which party was gaining, over which entities were gaining, over which were the voters actually being encouraged by this money. What was happening is now the big question after this expose has happened and this scrapping of aid has happened by the US government. How do you react to the politics of it all that has broken out in India and of course also in the West?
Uday, that question is for me, I presume.
Yes. Yes, Professor Nalapat.
I simply want to say that if those who were the beneficiaries of such aid would obviously not like the fact that aid has been cut. Now, frankly, as Adit correctly said, it's gross and blatant election interference. It's a very innocent sounding name, increasing voter turnout. Now, what does that mean? I mean, it is clearly interfering in the elections. Clearly, certain types of voters or certain clusters of voters are being incentivized and the word incentivize I use in a very euphemistic sense. I don't want to use a stronger word. Are being incentivized to come out and vote for what USAID people know will be the party they favor. Don't forget, USAID, I mean, it was run for quite some time by Samantha Power. Samantha Power is well known as a regime change specialist in the US. She's very much a regime change specialist, especially France. She's known for a visceral dislike of Russia and a visceral dislike of any leader who, in her view, has a different view on Russia. Any world leader. Viktor Orban of Hungary, quite frankly, came in her sights for the simple reason that Viktor Orban refused to get involved in this senseless war that is being conducted against Russia, and which has only cost Ukraine a huge amount of land, treasure, and very precious human lives. So there is no question that it will be very, very interesting to note who the beneficiaries of this funding were. But personally, in my view, this is an issue on which uh, common sense says all political parties need to come together and not bicker, and to ensure that whoever gets that kind of aid is frankly, they're identified, because it is gross election interference. The reality is Donald Trump has done India a big favor by cutting that aid, because it has enabled the electorate to cast its vote the way it wants to cast its vote. If some elements of the electorate do not want to cast their vote in the absence of an incentive, well, that's their choice. Why should any foreign agency fund individuals who will then fund them and encourage them? And some of these agencies, from what I understand, are agencies that are completely committed to regime change in India. I'm using the word some again in a very euphemistic sense, and they have been quite vocal. I mean, when they feel it's better not to be so vocal in India because Prime Minister Modi is so popular, outside when they go, they've been very vocal in carrying a completely distorted picture of India as less than a democracy. The 2024 elections, if proved the obvious, that India was a democracy. And the target of 220 that had been set for the BJP by the anti-Modi forces, the BJP crossed that limit, fortunately for the country, by 20 seats. And Prime Minister Modi has been enabled to come in for a third term. So the reality is, Uday, this is a big favor done to us. And there's no reason why any Indian citizen should get upset at the cutting of that funding. In my personal view, I think USAID, whatever funding it has done, I think India can walk taller if it says, no, we don't want any such funding. We can rely on our own. In that sense, Prime Minister Modi, frankly, I mean, he has been the target of that money. And he has been the target because he has upheld Indian interests. Where it comes to commodities, he has bought commodities where they are cheaper. If it is Russia, so be it. He has taken a very firm stand on the security of the Indo-Pacific. He wants a free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific. Open and inclusive. He doesn't want it to be the private lake of any particular country. So, in all that, he's perfectly on the same page as the Trump administration, and I'm sure that very seasoned interlocutors, such as the National Security Advisor and the External Affairs Minister, would be conveying this to the American side so that any misconceptions about India are removed, and President Trump understands in the new Cold War that's there India is firmly on the side of the democracies. And yes, Prime Minister Modi wants peace. How do you get peace? You get peace through deterrence, and you get deterrence through strength, and you build up strength through alliances. India is an indispensable ally for the US, and the US is for India. I think this is going to be conveyed quite clearly to everybody in the Trump administration, and I think that's really going to, make people understand why there was so much opposition from certain sections of the international community to Prime Minister Modi. The same people who were against, let's say, Orban, and the same people who are against people who stood up for their country's interests, as Donald Trump is doing, and as Prime Minister Modi has done since 2014, Uday.
Okay, let me in fact quickly take that to Gautam Mukherjee as well. Gautam Mukherjee, interestingly, of course, apart from the politics, in India, we are seeing the US president also now reacting to this development, welcoming this decision taken by the DOG headed by Elon Musk, and also questioning what this money was meant for, which was going for voter turnout.
Well, what's interesting is that money such as this has been flowing into India and has made an impact on particularly the last general elections. If you notice, the India Alliance has gained more seats, and there has been a lot of unrest on the streets of India, which continued right the way through. Disruption of parliament, demonstrations, riots. As Professor Nalapat pointed out, a lot of misinformation spread both in India and abroad, siding with countries such as China and Pakistan, questioning our institutions and their uprightness. Talking of a threat to the Constitution, and so on. Now, what is most welcome now is that this $21 million is for the future or for the current situation. So that's $21 less of this mischief being played on India. It is also being played all over. A lot of this in the past. Now that the government has started an investigation on who's been receiving the USAID, will out a lot of NGOs who are not doing what they're meant to be doing and are really conduits for other activities. So in a sense, this puts some power to our elbow as well. And as a trend, it is making it very clear that America is not, under Trump, interested in interfering, at least in India. I do not know if this is across the board, because after all, they are the world's largest power, and there are certain places where their self-interest may require them to continue influencing local politics. But in India, I think they want to go with the government and with the alliance, which has been interfered with under the last administration, and which created a lot of doubt in Indian minds as to the real intentions of the United States, because they seem to have spoken out of both sides of their mouth. Now, that is dissipating very, very quickly. The other thing about Trump is that he wants to make sure that most of his agenda is carried out in the first 2 years of his term, because after that, sometimes presidents are regarded as lame ducks as they go into the final 2 years, and he is not right now constitutionally allowed to seek a third term. So, this is it. What he does now is what he leaves behind and what becomes his legacy. and what becomes the change. So he's hit the ground running in a lot of ways. He's told NATO to fund its own war in Ukraine if it so chooses. It's told Ukraine that, look here, you can't fire off my shoulder, that is the US shoulder. He's had a conference already in Saudi Arabia between Russia and America to settle matters without including Europe or Ukraine. These are revolutionary methods that haven't been used in a very, very long time in international diplomacy. But Trump is not afraid to do so. It is interesting times, and I think overall very favorable times. One more knock-on, quite apart from USAID and its depredations, is the effect that Trump's reciprocal tariffs attitude is likely to have on Indian tariffs. Indian tariffs are, I agree with Trump, exorbitantly high on a lot of things in order to protect Indian industry to a dazzling degree. Trump is talking of putting 25% on imported cars. We have 100%, 150% on imported cars. What kind of protection is this? I can understand that you have a little bit more for, completely built units coming in rather than CKD units, knockdown units which are assembled here, or those who are manufacturing here, because none of them are really manufacturing right from the smallest to the largest component. But to have 100%, 150% is absurd. And are they realizing more revenue? Is India realizing more revenue? No. There are a handful of people who ignored these massive tariffs and still import cars. But if these were indeed 25%, like America, then not only would Indian automotive industry perform much better under the competition, it stuck to Fiat and Ambassador. All the years there was no competition without any improvement. Then came Maruti and the winds of change began to appear. Now you have 50 car companies and there is a good deal of Indian competition. You need to bring down tariffs. I hope Trump helps the Modi administration to kick down these tariffs because they're quite absurd and left over from the socialist regimes. And, our bureaucracy does not respond fast enough to changing times.
Okay, let me in fact take that back to Professor Nalapat. Professor Nalapat, what's also interesting now is the reaction that has come in from the Hungarian Prime Minister. Now, Soros is of Hungarian origin as well, so this reaction is interesting. He is saying that his aides are now fleeing to Belgium to continue their operations. What do you make of this sensational claim?
Well, I'd like to say that in my view, any agency that works actively to sabotage an elected government, and frankly, if it's through elections is one thing, but if it's through sponsored protests, I mean, we have seen enough of that, Uday. We have seen sponsored protests that have lasted through the election cycle, beyond it, and frankly, who were the interested parties? A mere handful compared to the total population of India. And this mere handful has been commanding tens and tens of billions of dollars or billions of dollars worth of Indian rupees in taxpayer rupees for their personal benefit. And this is absurd. The whole country is paying taxes for the sake of these few people. So I think it's very very appropriate if the government, for example, puts the farm laws once again to the state governments. Let the state governments implement them. And if they do, and they find that the situation is much better for their states, other governments will follow. So whether it's in agriculture, whether it's in industry, as Gautam correctly said, too many large industrialists, they help MSMEs and medium and small industry in other countries. MSMEs become champions in those countries, and MSMEs in India suffer as a consequence. there has to be a focus on Indian MSMEs, one way
Absolutely.
or the other. And I think our industrialists need to learn that
Okay.
and basically
Okay. Adit
ensure
Kothari, last word to you.
our
I've run out of
MSMEs.
time almost. Adit Kothari, last 30 seconds to you.
So I think Professor Nalapat spoke about a very interesting character, Samantha Power. I mean, you look at her conduct and her associations with people like, say, Sunita Vishwanath. She was apparently the champions of change in the Obama administration. And you look at the kind of articles she has written about India being on the brink of destruction. So it goes to demonstrate that they have a sinister plot. And they have been working to engineer a certain narrative against India, which they want to use in their game of carrot and stick. And that is finally being dismantled. So hopefully, we will end the cycle to that carrot and stick game. Uday.
All right. My thanks to all of our guests for joining us on this discussion.